My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life. So, Dan, sometimes we see clients come in and they've received an inheritance and they're just like, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. What things would you share with them?
Well, inheritance, it's obviously tied to somebody dying, and so it's an emotional act in and of itself, whether that's your parents, some sort of relative, a sibling. We see all of these different times where, baby boomers are getting older, and that generation, you're going to have more and more people passing away and leaving inheritance to their heirs. And so we always start with this process of, again, and we talk a lot about this in financial planning, understanding what is this money for? And we'll see people make a lot of mistakes with inheritance that they would never make with their own money because it feels like it's kind of found money.
Mhm.
I didn't anticipate getting this, or maybe I didn't anticipate getting this much. And so then they'll make very poor decisions and go, well, if I'm not maximizing this resource, it's not that big of a deal. I didn't expect it anyway. So I think the most important thing is to be patient with, I've received this sum of money. First off, understand what the ramifications are, because depending on the type of inheritance, there's lots of different types of accounts. Some of that inheritance won't be taxable at all. Some of the inheritance might be significantly taxed, like in an IRA, for example. You might receive an annuity as inheritance where some of it's taxable, some of it's not taxable. And so we never know until we look at all these different sources what the tax hit's going to be. So the idea is to be patient, get the money into your own name first, then figure out a plan. Okay, what am I doing with this? Do I have to take required minimum distributions if it's an IRA? What are my options for using this money? Should I pay off a mortgage, for example? There's no reason to jump into those types of decisions immediately. Take your time, understand what the money's for first, then start to take actions.
I think those are great tips. And I think that illustrates the importance of actually talking to someone and having someone guide you through that process as well, because it can be very intimidating, especially if it's a large sum of money. And like you said, it's money that's unexpected. You don't always know what you want to use the money for. And can you speak on that? What if someone, even in talking with you or talking to an advisor, what if someone doesn't know what they want to do with the money? What
Well,
would you suggest in that situation?
yeah, that's okay, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there's lots of times in life where we're not exactly sure at this point in time what we want to do with that money. And what I would tell people is, if you're not sure, don't do things that will, lock the money up. Don't do things that just, try to keep it as flexible as possible,
Mhm.
as compared to doing something that all of a sudden you look back on and you go, oh, well, now I've changed my goals. I do know what I want to use the money for, but I did something inappropriate. Maybe I implemented a product because some advisor told me to do this, and now it just isn't the right thing to do. So I would say try to maintain flexibility if you're
Mhm.
not sure. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, when you think through, should I invest this money and try to grow it? Or should I maybe use it to pay off debt?
Mhm.
Once you start thinking in terms of productive uses of that money, in most cases, we will commonly come back to people and say, this was found money. You have a mortgage. Why not
Mhm.
use this money to pay off your mortgage, assuming it's a relatively tax efficient way of doing it? Why not pay off the mortgage? And worst case scenario, you're going to end up saving all that cash flow associated with making mortgage payments. and you're going to accumulate that as equity in your home. Now, granted, that's not a flexible use of the
Mhm.
money. So if you're not sure what you want to do with the money, don't just go pay off your mortgage as soon as you get something. But at the same time, if you're not sure, should I invest? Should I, pay down debt? In general, we're going to be leaning more towards the paying down debt and
Mhm.
focusing more on cash flow as compared to just accumulating more.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of the hierarchy of cash flow. It kind of gives you a frame of reference, even in situations like this where someone receives an inheritance, they can use the hierarchy of cash flow to go back and look at each step of it and see where they can best allocate their money.
Well, one of the examples I saw just this week is somebody had inherited money from their mom, and this was, 7, 8 years ago. And they had this account, they used it for various things over time. It was a non qualified account, meaning they had access to the money over time. And at the same time, that was great. It was invested for those things. But what they didn't do, and they had an advisor, by the way, what they didn't do is systematically every year max out a Roth IRA account.
Mm,
So I have this after tax money that's earning interest, it was earning dividends. All of that interest and dividends was taxable to them as they were earning it. And instead, they could have been max funding a Roth IRA every year for both of them. And now, by the time, right now, they're 63, by the time they're 63, that entire Roth would have been growing tax free. They could
mhm,
take that out entirely tax free. So when you think about like a tax perspective, would I rather have this account in something that's taxable, earning dividends and interest that I'm paying taxes on, or would I rather have those dividends and interest in something where I'm paying no taxes? And that's kind of a
mhm.
no-brainer. And yet I've seen that example tons of times where even advisors don't counsel people to slowly and systematically move that money from a taxable account to a potentially tax-free account.
Yeah, that is a great point. That is something that seems so obvious, but as you're saying, it gets missed often. So let's shift the perspective from one who plans to leave an inheritance. Is there anything that they need to be mindful of in making that decision?
So I think the biggest thing is, well, first off, understanding what those resources are.
Mhm,
If I have a big 401k or IRA and I'm leaving it to my children, and my children are adults and they're responsible and I trust them, it is almost always as simple as just naming them as beneficiaries. They're going to
mhm,
get the money. They're going to have to take that money out within a 10-year period of time. They get to choose. One might take it all out right away, one might take it out over time. They get to choose to do that. So that's like an IRA. Now, if it's a house or it's property, now I have to put some thought into things like, are they going to keep the house? Or, maybe I have land. Are they going to keep the land, a cabin, you know, or are they just going to sell it? And
mhm,
now we get back to what is this resource for? So if it's more of a, maybe it's a family cabin and you want your kids to be able to keep that and they're going to go there and kind of make memories and all of that. Now you might want to start getting into more trust planning where you create a trust, and that might be what ultimately owns the property with provisions in there that maybe it can't be sold, or maybe I have a certain cash resource that's going to help pay for the property taxes or the upkeep. So
mhm.
thinking through, what types of resources do I have? And then how do I want my kids or my heirs to be able to get that money? In many cases, that's the most important aspect.
Absolutely. I actually heard of a case where someone was being left property but incurred a bunch of different legal fees because there were issues with the property. So that's something to be mindful of as well. If you do plan to leave property, that, everything is clean and squared away so that the person that you're intending to give this gift, but sometimes that gift turns into a curse if you're just being bombarded with legal fees and it just becomes more than that person can bear because of all of these extra strings that are attached to it. So,
Well, and thinking in terms of planning ahead, what we can tell from tons of experience is these heirs end up getting this inheritance and they go, okay, now I have to work through how this works. And maybe they have to work through the probate process. Maybe they have to figure out how to manage a trust. They've never done these things before. And we'll have people say, this was a nightmare trying to figure out where stuff was, how is it going to work? Working with banks is really tough when somebody's passed away in many cases if you haven't properly titled the accounts. If you have property in more than one state, now I might have to do probate in more than one state. So there's a lot of planning considerations involved. But one of the things I'd like to share with viewers is we have a client where he inherited money from his mom. His mom was a nurse. She was one of our clients originally. We didn't know him at the time. And he inherited this money that really should have set him up for the rest of his life. And we used some of the inheritance to pay off his mortgage. We funded Roth IRAs for him from this account, and he was fine with everything for quite a few years. And then all of a sudden, his life started to shift. And for whatever reason, we don't really know exactly what he has going on in his life. He started to take out really big chunks of this money, and it was consistent, like over and over and over again. And what we've seen is he has depleted a very large account over the last couple of years. We know he's had legal problems. We know he's had other considerations. And there's not much his mom really could have done because at the time that he inherited things, he was very grateful. He was responsible. He was doing a good job with his life. He was living within his means. But I think at this stage, she would be frankly pretty disappointed in what has happened with, this inheritance and how it affected his behavior and his life. And it goes to the argument, like that's where you end up a lot of times using trusts,
Mhm.
is you can put restrictions on the trust and say you can only use it for these things, or you can only use so much per year, or there's different things you can do to control that inheritance. So for him, it ended up becoming more of
Mhm.
that really sad tale of a curse of inheritance rather than
Mhm.
being a positive thing.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. And like you said, there's no way that she would have been able to predict that that would have happened.
Not at all.
I think it's important also with inheritances to just have open dialogue and open conversation about it. I know sometimes maybe people want it to be a surprise, but I think some aspects of it, there needs to be a conversation.
Well, and another thing that's really important when you go to that conversation aspect is, the generation before, like my grandparents' generation, they didn't talk about money.
Hmm.
I mean, they would die and their kids had no idea what they had. They didn't know where it was. It was a mystery of trying to figure out where all this was. And then,
Hmm.
my parents' generation still pretty quiet about things, but they're getting a little bit better. And so learning from some of that process and talking about it is important. And one of the things I would tell people is many of our clients get a lot more satisfaction out of giving while they're alive
Hmm.
as compared to just saying, hey, when I die, you're going to get maybe a lot of money. Seeing that influence over the people that you care about most, whether it's helping them buy a house or helping them get through a tough stretch with their job, or maybe taking a family vacation that seems like it's a lot, but now you've created those memories while you were alive. For many of our clients, that's much more impactful than just dying with a big number and having that go to their heirs as well.
I love that. That is such a great idea. And that's great insight for those who are thinking about that at this time. Well, Dan, thank you for this conversation. Is there anything else you want to add before we close?
No, I don't think so. I think if you get an inheritance, it's again always coming back to what is this money for?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And until next time, have a good one.
Thanks, Leah.